Hi and welcome to another wet on wet painting technique demonstration. I've got a slight change to how I normally do things today. I've been trying some new techniques from a couple of other painters on the internet. So we're going to work essentially on the wet and wet technique, but we're not going to be half as wet as what we might normally use our canvas. I'm painting on hardboard today. This is just normal hardboard bought from the DIY store. This was about £5 for a fairly large sheet that I've managed to cut 3 canvases this size out of. All I've then done, it was white primed anyway, so I just rubbed that down with sandpaper, and then I've gone over this with the standard Bob Ross grey gesso, and it's had 4 coats of grey gesso. So it's, you know, it's a fairly smooth surface to work on. So it won't give us the texture that a canvas gives us, but it is very fun to work on, and it allows the paint to dry really quite quickly. And one of the things, normally when we paint wet on wet, we're working on putting a thin colour over the top of a thick colour. With this technique, or with this method that I'll be doing today, we're not going to be thinning paint half as much as what we might normally do with the standard wet on wet. We're still going to be painting wet on wet, but we're not going to be thinning paint so much. We're going to be putting less paint onto our hardboard here. We're only going to thin the sky to allow us to blend some clouds. I've got no idea what's going to happen. I've got a rough idea. I think we're going to have some mountains over here, off in the distance, maybe some big trees over this side, maybe looking down into a valley down here or something. I don't know. We're just going to play it by ear. The only change that I've got so far, let me just get that nice and close to the camera. If you can see here, I've got this gel medium. Now this is replacing thinning down titanium white into a liquid white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix titanium white with this gel medium to thin my paint, which will just allow me to put white across this top section, which is going to be my sky. So that's really the only bit of thinning down we're going to do on paint. So it's literally just mixing the gel medium with white, and then I'm imagining mountains here, big trees up here, so I'm just going to fill in, I don't know, just as a rough idea, maybe this top bit here is going to be my sky. So it's literally, you just come into that gel medium, then back into your titanium white, and this can be really scrubbed in. And it doesn't matter how rough you scrub this in, it doesn't have to look pretty. We're going to be putting on blue, maybe some dark black and stuff like that on here anyway. Our clouds are going in here, and because the canvas is grey, you know, it underpaints itself almost. You can see, even just scrubbing it in like this, there are areas of this white that are showing some of the grey through, and it creates a very mobile sky. It's a sky that's got a lot of life in it, rather than just a flat blue colour. And I'm not putting a lot of paint on here. You can probably see by the time I get over to this side of the canvas, I've reloaded the brush 2 or 3 times, but there's not a lot of paint on the canvas. Probably nowhere near as much as what you would put on if you were putting on liquid white. So that'll do us. That's just a white underpainting, and you know, there's not much paint on the canvas. I can rub my finger through it, there really isn't much paint on there at all. But that's just going to be enough for us to add some colour and then add some clouds in here. I'm not particularly worried about the sky today. I think most of this is going to be taken up with mountains and scenery and stuff like that, so we're not going to worry too much about it. Now if I come into some blue, and this is just, I'm not using any different colours to what you'll normally get in sort of the Bob Ross wet on wet technique. So I'm still using my Bob Ross titanium white, still using my Bob Ross Prussian blue, and I've got some midnight black down here on the palette as well. So I'm just going to create a blue sky over here. Now what I'm thinking, what I want to try and do is maybe have a fairly dark mountain here. So I'm going to leave a light area here. So I'm not going to put anything in here yet, maybe just a hint of blue, just to start things off. And then as I come further away from that, I can just put some more blue in. And you know, the important thing here is to realise how little paint is going onto the I would say canvas, but it's not canvas, it's hardboard. Put some grey up in the corner here, some midnight black, just blend that in. Doesn't matter what goes on down here. And we're just really scrubbing this colour into the hardboard. You can probably see how hard I'm bending the bristles on this filbert brush, and it's just really scrubbing in there. Refilling my colour occasionally. I want to keep fairly mobile with this sky. I don't want to have just one kind of blue up here. I want different colours of blue. Some of this midnight black coming into play. Because I've got a grey background anyway to this picture, everything will stay fairly muted. Don't want any sort of garish colours until I really hit my highlights. Once my highlights come into play on my trees and my bushes and my mountain, then obviously things can get a bit more bright and garish, and as things get closer to us, obviously we'll look at adding brighter colours. So I've got a background sky very loosely put in there. I'm going to darken the corners just a little bit, grab some midnight black, maybe just scrub the corners in here. And literally the only reason that gel medium within the white there is just to allow me to blend these colours into each other a bit, just so I'm not really struggling to add dark shades or light shades. If we darken the corners, it'll draw the eye closer to the centre of the picture, which is what we want. That's where the bulk of our interest is going to be. So we'll just darken these corners a bit, maybe make them look like a cloud coming through. Like I say, I think I'm going to have a mountain up here to a certain extent, so I'm not hugely worried about my sky up here at the minute. Clean your brush down here, doesn't really matter what's going on. I want this bit here to be really bright, so I'm going to grab some pure white. I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to brighten this up just by tapping in here to start with, so that I've always got my white, and then I'll just blend that out a bit. If you want, you can use your blender brush to blend this out. I'm just going to work with the filbert for now. Maybe bring some of these up into clouds. I'm not going to worry too much. This is going to be my light source, so I want to almost paint the underside of clouds up here. And you can see how sort of loose I'm being doing this. This is way off in the background, so we don't want, if I add too much definition up here, you're going to be losing depth and distance in your painting. So there's no need to go into uber definition up here. We're not going to talk big thunder clouds. We're just going to have small clouds. And if you want to blend, just go lighter with the brush. Because these are quite stiff brushes, what tends to happen if you press hard, you cut through the paint that's underneath. If you press lighter, or if you get a softer brush, you don't cut through the underpainting. So the lighter you can press on here and apply paint, the easier it will be for you. And even with a filbert brush like this, a fairly stiff brush, it's easy to come in and just layer on some white. If you do want it a bit thinner, you can add a bit of that gel medium. That will help things just slide off the brush a bit. But you know, you don't want to be thinning this paint too much. This is all in the background, so you've got to, you know, we might have some big trees in here, or our mountains might come up on here a little bit. So we don't want to be putting too thin a paint on here, because then we'll struggle later on with the painting. So we can quite very quickly throw a sky in here. If you've got too much on your brush, rub it off down here, it doesn't matter. We'll paint over it, doesn't matter. Really doesn't matter. Just blend out some of this sky I've started to put in. Got a little bit missing over here, so we'll just You'll notice also how high I'm holding the brush. I'm holding the brush really right back at the tip here, and it just makes it looser. You can sort of sit back and you can watch the painting form rather than getting right up close and maybe losing some of the flow. Doing it this way, you know, just allows you to be a bit freer. You're not worrying so much about things. You can just be a bit more carefree. It's maybe a bit more relaxing to paint like this, I think. So just layering up some clouds back here. Don't want too much. The important thing is I want this bit to remain really bright, and I want to darken away. Maybe a couple of, you know, the sun's here somewhere, I don't know where. Maybe it's here somewhere, so I'll brighten it up a bit. But this is going to be our primary light source, so we just want this to be lighter than anything else up here in our sky. There we go, we've got a little sky happening up here quite happily. Now, like I say, if you wanted to, you could grab your standard blender brush and just using the corner, you could come in and blend this. It's entirely up to you if you want to do that. Some people like a rougher sort of oil painting that looks like it's been painted. Some people want it a bit smoother. If you want it a bit smoother, you want it a bit blended, then by all means grab your blender brush and just come in and blend it, and it'll soften that entire sky away. And you can blend it until the highlights disappear and it becomes just a slightly lighter area in the sky. Yeah, you know, it's easy to do. And you can see the blender brush hasn't picked up a huge amount of paint there. You know, it's not coated with paint because there isn't a lot of paint on the canvas. So there's no need for anything to be up here. There's not a huge amount up here. What I'm just going to do, being very careful, just going to grab a tiny bit of cad yellow, come into my white, and I want primarily white on this. I don't, you know, we've got blue on the canvas as well, or on the hardboard. So we just want to be a bit careful about making this a bit too yellow, because obviously we'll end up with green. But we've just coloured our yellow, our white slightly a bit there. And what we can do is just lay some of that in a couple of places. And again, it's a gentle touch to do this. There's quite a lot of paint on the brush, and you can see I'm rotating the brush, so there's always new paint hitting the canvas. I'm just going to drop in sort of some highlights along the bottom edges of these clouds, maybe just to give us a hint that the sun is back here. So you can see I rotate the brush. So as you rotate the brush, it picks up new paint and it stops the paint that's already on the brush from colouring too much. So it's not picking up so much of the blue, and you can keep a purer paint. So with that done, we'll go back to our blender brush and we can just blend just the top edge of that out. Our light's here, so it's hitting the bottom edge of these clouds, so we don't want to be necessarily blending that bottom edge away, we just want to be touching the top edge and keeping that softened, and then right the way across the sky, just to blend everything together a bit. Now I think we've got a sort of relatively nice sky floating away back there. If you wanted to, you could darken this colour a bit, and you could shadow some of these clouds. It's entirely up to you. These could become shadowed. You could form more clouds up the back here. And again, it's alternating between a harder touch and a lighter touch that's going to allow you to just lay this paint on here. There we go. I think that's pretty good. That'll do us. That'll do. We're not going to spend too much time up here. Okay, so we'll scrub away. It doesn't matter, this is, we're going to have mist back here. As things get further away from us, though we have mist, you know, that's what we deal with. So, I said I was going to have a big mountain here, maybe coming across. Trees up here, I think, but I think along here we're going to have a mountain. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my black, some blue. I'm going to mix that into my sky colour that I had. So I've got a very pale blue. Put some more black in it because I want it to be grey. I want a pale grey up here rather than a blue. And I'm going to mix a variance of this colour on my palette. So I've got an entire blend of this colour. Let me show you what my palette looks like. So you can see here, this is the white I started with, but here I've got blue, black, a blend of white and blue, coming into more of a black colour in here. So this is a black, blue and white, and then in here we've got more of the black and the white colour. And what that's going to allow me to do is put various shades of mountain back here, just from one mix of colour. To start with, I want a mountain quite far away here, so I don't want to put on too much paint, and I don't want it to be too dark. If it gets too dark, it'll look too close. I'm not putting a huge amount of paint on, I'm just going to roughly sketch in a mountainous landscape back here. Once you've got that edge, kind of pull it down. Down here, I've got nothing on the... I've got nothing here, so there's nothing here to stop this area being almost dry paint. You know, it's quite hard to lay paint down here, but it allows you to start to blend out the bottom of mountains that might be further away and bring mountains in front of it straight away. So straight away I can create a layer there. So this is further away in my mind than here, so this can have a bit more paint on it, and I've misted just by lifting up or pulling down, whichever way you want to go. You can mist out an area in there, and it's just scrubbing this background colour into place. You can really see the flecks on my bristles there as I scrub that in. Let's go along here a bit, maybe have another little lump. Oh no, maybe it comes right up here. I don't know. We're going to go up here anyway. I've decided. I'm going to lose some of my sky up there. I don't care. Maybe we'll have some trees covering up the back of here. So we're not going to. We'll just blend it out. We'll blend it out and really not worry about it for now. So, and I can start choosing what's in front, what's behind. Here I've got a light bit. I'm going to keep that light bit, and then up here, maybe I'll sketch in another little ruggedy bit just there. Happy days, good. Back to my colour. Let's come down here a bit. Not caring what's happening down here. This is all going to turn into mist probably. I don't know what's going to happen up here yet. Let's just let it blend off into nothing. Blend it away into nothing for now. Maybe there'll be some highlights on there. Maybe there'll be some trees. We don't know. We don't care. So we've got, and it doesn't matter if the edges of these are really refined. The further this gets away from us, the more blended away all these mountains are going to look. So we'll just splat off the majority of paint on my brush. Good. It's back here. This light is coming through. Obviously it's going to light these mountains back here quite well, and then it'll pick up contours of these mountains, so on and so forth. But I don't want these to be really, really bright. So what I might do is just lighten up some of this grey with the white I've got. I'm still using that same old mucky brush. Not changed my brush at all, I've just loaded it up with some white. And in here, I'm just going to start hinting at some land that lives back here. And again, you can roll the brush and then blend that bottom edge out. Because there's not much paint on the canvas still, it's quite easy to work into this and just add a lighter highlight, which is going to give us the edges of our mountains. Now here, if I go into my darker colour, maybe here the edge of that mountain is dark. So here is going to be in shadow. So we'll just pull that back. So I envision the light is coming across here. This part is shadow. Maybe there'll be a harsh highlight right on the edge of it, but this bit here is also going to be in shadow. So that's going to be shadowed. This is where our light's coming from. Figure out where your shadows are going to live and just drop them in. And the more you work on this, obviously the more you can shape your mountain. Probably doing this method, it's easier to put in shadows before you do anything else. I'm going to think that maybe there's more highlight than shadow there. I might want to drop this section back, so I'll put some darker shadow in here and just blend that back. And again, you can be quite loose. The paint's drying up here quite rapidly. You can feel the brush sort of grabbing what paint is underneath. Every once in a while I just scrub off what's left. This will all become, this is bringing this colour down into other parts of the painting, so there'll always be a blending of the colours we've used in the background coming forwards to the foreground, and it just lends coherency to the painting, so that everything flows together, if you will. I'm going to swap over to another brush. Actually, not yet. I just want to get some highlight on here, and then we'll go over to another brush. So this side, nice delicate touch, and we can start shaping some of the highlight out here. Notice we're not going for harsh highlights at the minute. This is all still fairly subdued, and that's what you want up here in the background. You don't want harsh highlights, not yet anyway. Maybe right up here where the sky is blending down a bit. Yes, we can put in some harsher highlights. We'll pick up some of these yellows and we'll bring some harsher highlights in here. Also at the back here, you're not going to see much colour. What I'm going to do is I'm going to swap over to a really soft flat brush. Okay, now we've got some paint here on the canvas, not a huge amount, nowhere near as much as what we would normally be using. But if we use a hard brush, when we apply paint, we're going to be cutting through all the layers here. So if we use a soft brush, you can still load it with paint. So I've loaded some of my highlight colour here, but if we use a soft brush, we can actually gently start to apply this colour, and it won't pick up as much of the base colour because it's a softer brush. So you can lay in colour over the top of colour and really start to just carefully think about what the land's doing back here. Maybe bring some blue in just to make it look a bit colder. Now it's just a question of working, creating shape and form here with our rocks, figuring out where the mountain lives, where the highlight is going to pick up on the edge of the mountain. Maybe just down there is some, this bright sunlight is really sort of zinging across of the mountain here. So we can add all manner of things down here just to give it some depth. Don't want to go into too much detail. If you go into too much detail back here, you'll start to lose your depth and distance, but obviously you need something to just hint that there is shape and form back here. And the longer you spend doing this, obviously the better your mountains will look and the more time you can play. I mean, I'm doing a video for you guys, so I'm not going to play too much back here because it'll be 2 hours of me doing this and you'll be bored. But it gives you an idea of what you can do. Let's come over to this other side and we'll just work in some highlights down here as well. But I think the thing is, you just got to not be afraid and just start to work with what you've got. See, this has created a really lovely sort of harsh shadow in here, so I want to try and keep that. I'll work back into that in a moment and keep that shadow, because that's what I want. I'm going to keep the top edge of these highlights and just keep some of that dark shadow in there as well. That works for me, that gives me depth, distance, so on and so forth. I think we've got a fair amount of depth going on in there. We can work away at this all day, doesn't really matter. If you want to then use that same brush, come into some dark, and now we can pick out that shadow that I like so much there, and we'll just blend that in. Maybe a bit more down here. Just start adding shadow here, and because I'm using a soft brush, I can literally just add dark and light, light and dark, and that's all I'm doing. I'm playing dark against light. That's what you need. You need dark to show light, so that's all we're doing. Working dark against light. If there's a light section, the section next to it will be dark because it's in shadow. So now you can add shadowy bits. Obviously, the closer you get to the light here, the probably a bit darker the shadow may look. But if you apply too much shadow back here, then you'll bring the rock face forwards, and you don't want that. This needs to stay way back off in the distance. So the less detail you put here, the easier that illusion of distance will become. And I'm just flicking backwards and forwards between my colours. If you want to, you can come back here and just add even more mountains way off here in the distance. And if you're careful, they'll just, you barely got to add them. They're just sitting there. People come up and look really closely and they'll say, oh, well, actually, the land goes away, miles away back here. It's all just way off there in the distance. And it's all done with just being careful about your light and your dark and your colours. Almost looks like a little pond back in there. That's a happy accident that's happened back there, just giving me a a lake. So here, I'm going to bring this forwards just by adding a bit of highlight. So yeah, it's starting to work back here. We're starting to get depth, distance over here. Start adding some colours and everything. I'm mixing everything on my palette. Nothing is being. I'm not thinking, oh, I want this colour to be sort of blue or green or anything like that. I'm just mixing it on my palette. I've got a very messy palette at the moment. I'll show you in a minute. Let me just finish adding this bit of mountain here, and I'll show you my palette. It's pretty disgusting at the present. So look, you know, there's my palette. All of my colours are blending together to create, you know, this painting. And what it means is everything flows through the entire painting. I'm going to keep coming back to all these colours on my palette to start creating other areas in here, to start creating my trees and whatever. So the colour that I choose is going to flow through the entire painting. Okay, so back here I want to almost mist what we've got back here. So I'm going to grab my blender brush. I'm going to tap into some of the blue and white I've got there, just on the corner of the brush. So it's literally just on this top corner of the brush here. And I'm going to just come in, and with small circular strokes you can add mist. So tap and a small circular stroke to just mist that away. Tap into the white, small circular strokes, and you can create mist down the bottom here. And you can carefully come over all of these and mist them. Just pull them, push them around, but do it like you would if we were doing a normal wet on wet technique. Do it in the flow, the way the mountain is flowing. You don't want to push it against the mountain, straight up, straight down. It'll look like, you know, it's raining upwards or something stupid. So you don't want to be doing that. But you can just gently pull in the direction of the mountain to create a blurry effect, to mist it away all the way back there. So we've got a fairly decent background there. I'm going to grab another filbert brush. I'm going to start putting in some foreground stuff here, I think. So I'm going to come into my black, my grey. So again, the same colours I've got on the palette here. I'm going to put in a tiny little bit of cad yellow into this colour. So I've got a bluey grey with just a slight undercurrent of green. Again, I don't want anything too dark back here. I'm just going to touch, and I'm going to start just dropping in a hint of trees along this front edge. Not too many, just something that intimates that maybe back here we've got a tree line. I know maybe they go up the side of the mountain, but as trees go up the mountain then they get scarcer, so you know, you need to dot them a bit more as they go up there. So they look like trees, but we're just intimating that there's maybe something just living up the side of the mountain there, heading up. Down here I'm just going to keep tapping because it will mist away the bottom. And you'll note that I'm following a lay of the land. Maybe I've flattened out a bit here, but I'm following in general the lay of the land. So I'm keeping an idea of where I want the land to go. Like I say, here I think I'm going to put in some trees. I think this is just going to be dark trees back here. I don't want any colour in these, so I'm just going to, they're going to stay sort of dark and dingy back here. but I come up to the top of them, I can just start doing downward strokes. This is all going to be background trees anyway, so it's not, you know, we're probably going to draw something over the top of this, going to have a bigger tree over the top of this, so we're not worried too much. But I'm not creating a solid colour. I'm tapping in my colour here just to give me the lay of the land. And always coming back, mixing new colours, just putting maybe a hint of some other colours in here. And already you can see I've just added another layer of trees there. There's enough mist between those two layers, enough differentiation in the colours. A slightly darker colour over the top of a slightly lighter colour, and I've created another layer. Let's work just a little bit over this side as well. Don't want to miss it out. Tiny little bit of yellow in here. I'm just going to bring this tree line across, I think. Maybe cut off the entire bottom edge, but this bit of land looks a bit... This looks like it possibly goes a bit flatter here. So maybe we won't bring that up so steep, and we'll keep that a bit lower. Maybe we go into some grassy plains back here, I don't know. We've got a fairly high point of view. Maybe we're standing on the edge of a precipice here looking out over a valley, we don't know. We shall see. We'll see what happens. We're not too worried about what's going on here, to be honest. This is all way off in the distance. There's no detail, there's no colour. It's just shape and form, and thinking back here about mist. I'm not filling this area with colour. I'm leaving some misty areas, and then you can pull down on some of these and make it look like tree trunks far away, and then just come in front of them and tap, and it all mists away, and it gives you depth and distance, and you can get, I don't know how far away that's all looking now, but it's looking a fair old way if you ask me. So we'll come into some blue. Got a bit of white on our brush here. Maybe just a bit more yellow in here. So we're changing the flavour slightly. We can start bringing a bit more colour into this. Again, I'm not creating any shapes or forms. I'm just tapping in, maybe dragging slightly downwards at the bottoms, just to add a bit of shape to make it look like maybe there's tree trunks back here. But other than that, not really doing anything. Certainly nothing that you would think is hard or is painting a tree. You know, I'm not having to think about, oh, I'm going to have a tree here. I'm just painting. I'm just tapping the brush. Thinking about shape and form, yes, but there's nothing here that is hugely difficult to do. And I'm still using the same old mucky brush, just laying in colour. Sometimes I'm turning the filbert brush so that it's vertical to the canvas, sometimes horizontal. They give a different shape. The vertical one, if you've just loaded the brush and you tap gently, will give you the top of an evergreen. If you tap horizontally, then you'll get sort of your standard bushy tree rather than an evergreen tree. I think in here we're going to have, let's get a bit of brown coming. We're starting to move forwards in the painting, so chances are we're going to see a bit more colour coming through here. So I'm just going to put some brown on my canvas, on my palette, sorry. Come to that with the same old colour. I'm still not cleaning my brush again, so I've got the same old mucky colour. Brown, blue, black. I don't know, maybe we've got a rock lives here. Maybe another mountain face. lives here. So we're just going to drop a hint of that in. This is going to be another rock face. So again, blue, brown, black. And we've got another rock face just living here. And we'll blend it away, it doesn't really matter, it's just... We'll just knock it in there. Blend off down to the bottom. Don't even know where it goes up here, I don't think we even care at the minute. This is just going to be another rock face. So we've got blue and brown, come back into our white, maybe some of our yellow, and we can bring in some lighter colours to this, where the sun is zinging through here and catching the edge. So we're starting to build shape and form on this rock face. Remember, we're keeping some darkness here. We don't want all of this to be light. We're just trying to shape a rock here. So, started to hint at our rock shape there. Going to come into a lighter brown. We've mixed some of that brown with the yellow we've got on the palette here, and we're back to our really soft brush, and you can start to bring in that colour. And it's all just shape and form. That's all we're looking at, shape and form. Along the front here, I think this is... So we've got blue, yellow, brown. And we just start bringing all manner of shape and form into here. This one can afford to be a bit more detailed because this one's closer to us. So it can be a bit more jagged and give us a bit more interest in here. We can add blue as a reflected light source. So I'm coming into the brown and the blue and the black now to create my shadow colours. So in here is going to be shadow. And that will just start to work into there and build my rock. It's got quite jaggedy back here, isn't it? A lot of times you don't have to resort to black to make a dark colour. Blue will often recede a colour in people's eyes. Red will often dull colours. So you can use red as a duller. If you add blue, it tends to push things away. So a bluer colour will always look colder, and naturally we look at that as being further away because of that. So don't always jump straight in and think, oh well, this is going quite far away now, I think I'm going to have to throw some black in. You don't have to. You know, you don't have to put black straight in here thinking, oh, I'm going to put black in and that's going to send everything further away from people's eyes. It doesn't always work like that. So I'm going to come into some blue, some brown, some yellow, back into my dark old rubbishy black colour that I had here. But it's not just black. Brown, blue, bit of that yellow, just to add a hint of cream, a hint of green, sorry, not cream, I'm talking about. And up here, on the top of this, I think maybe we can have hint of a slightly bigger evergreen, one that's sat right out on the front of this rock here. Same again, so we just draw a line at the top, come in, tap lightly, and the further down the evergreen you get, the harder you tap. Now these are distant ones, so they haven't got a lot of shape and form. We know they're evergreens, you know, we know they're evergreens by the shape of them, but we're not seeing a huge amount of shape and form. Just shape. That's all we're worried about. Just shape. If we want to, we'll separate them with highlights in a minute. I don't even know whether we're going to be honest. We might just keep these dark and distant back here. But they're just sat out there. If we want to highlight them, we'll let them dry like that for now. Maybe we'll highlight them in a moment. I'm going to come into a slightly... I've got my cad yellow still down here. I'm going to make a dark green colour. I'm just going to bring in some greenery into this bit as an underpainting, so just scrub it in. I don't know what's going to go on along here. I'm just going to add some of this green down here. So I've just got a nice dark, or relatively dark, green underpainting there going in. It blends up the side of the rock here. Maybe some mossy, grassy area goes up the side of that cliff face as it lurks there. We'll just blend some of this out in the background there. The more you tap, obviously the mistier this will get, so you can mist it away quite happily. Maybe just a bit more lighter green there, and we'll just bring a hint of that lighter coloration into there. Nothing too much. This is still, in my mind, this is still quite far away, so I'm not going to worry about putting too much colour back there. Not yet. Maybe there's an evergreen that lives in front of this. So we'll drop him in. He lives just there. Blue and brown. Keeping it fairly dark still. And another evergreen lives there. Now our light source is here, so all our dark shades are going to have to be this side. So we want, if we do highlight these, we need to make sure highlight is only on this side. This side remains really dark. And what I might do is just keep everything over here really quite dark, just to give room for some highlight to come through. I might fill this up with evergreens. Doesn't really matter what it doesn't matter what we're worrying about back over here. We're only going to see shape, texture in some places, so this can be dabbed on. Just to cover up all this background. I'm still leaving some of that light to come through. If you want to create form, you can just add extra dabs of colour in here, and it starts to create distant trees and all manner of things that are happening back in here. It becomes a forest back in here. Just going to darken this one a bit. I know it's there, you know it's there. We'll pick that up with highlights. We're just going to highlight that in a minute, and so that will come out. So we know that we've got some trees back here. Let's finish off this bit just by putting some nice dark colours in here. Maybe a bigger evergreen lives there. You'll see it as it comes out the bottom here, but obviously you won't necessarily have seen it at the top. But it'll live there somewhere. Don't worry too much about where it lives. This could really just scrub all this in if you wanted to. Just to create some underpainting. Tap to add texture. Maybe put a bit of, just a hint of some colours back in here. Not much. You never want much, just a hint that there is some, you know, there's some greenery living back here. So just maybe just tap in the yellow occasionally just to put some colour back here, but you don't really want much. There's enough of a hint there that we've got evergreens and such like. Maybe down the front here. Maybe down the front here there's an evergreen who just thought, well actually I don't want to be with the rest of you guys, I'm going to live out here on my own. So he lives just here. Maybe he got stepped on. Oh, I don't know. But that's where he lives, just to give us a bit of... And if I just tap some darker colour in here, I can give the hint of other bushes and tree things that live around him. So we've got a load of dark colour there. Our highlights are going to come through from this direction, obviously. I'll work on those in a minute. We'll let them dry a little bit, and that's fine. Don't quite know what's going to happen over here yet. So the beauty of this technique is, you know, you never really know unless you've planned all this, which I obviously haven't. I haven't put a sketch in, so I haven't. You know, I really have no idea what's going to happen down here. I'm looking at it and thinking, well, what could I put in next? What can go in here? It's looking for like a nice place for a lake, possibly, isn't it? Maybe we could have a lake come down here, maybe a river. I don't know, maybe a river's going to start coming through in here somewhere. Don't know. Actually looks quite nice, actually, doesn't it? A river. Maybe old river's going to come down here like that. Something like that, we think. So in that case, all of this can become grass and trees and such like. We need another peninsula of land over here, so we can just roughly scrub in a bit of land that's going in there. That'll do us. Right, if we're going to have a river down here, using that same old mucky brush of mine, I'm going to start flatting in some white. And because my brush is messy anyway, and because I've been cleaning my brush down here, instantly it's picking up all of the colours of the landscape back here. So all the colours that I've already put on to the canvas and that are on my brush are being picked up. Back here somewhere, we'll just blend this off back here. If this bit's going to be land, we can just bring some of our water underneath there. Bring some of that dark down into it here. Haven't got any trees here to worry about. Yeah, so we can start bringing in a river. That looks quite nice. Maybe just bring some of that yellow and white into here. We're still working on the principle, if this is water, then obviously it lays flat. So your strokes have to be, in essence, horizontal across the canvas, or in this case hardboard. So you want to try and keep that as flat as you can. So we're going to come into our brown and blue, and now, since I know I've got river here, I can start bringing in some dark colour all the way over here, and actually just fundamentally creating this land where this river just disappears off into the distance there. If we wanted to, we could trickle it right the way back from over here. So here it comes, and it maybe disappears or comes through here. And it comes here. I'm going to have it disappear behind a headland there somewhere. But our river disappears right way back over there. Come through the headland. Along here. And look how much depth and distance that's given us. Back here, maybe we want a bit more green. I'm just going to come into our yellow, and this sun maybe is just hitting the top of some grass back here. It's so far away we don't actually see any detail at all, but we just know it's grass because that's the colour. And it just creates we're just adding, if you want, lay of the land back here. I'm not painting everything in because I want to leave dark areas and light areas. I'll just bring that headland out there and maybe reflect a bit of that into the water. Okay, that's good. We're really looking down into the valley there. That's the painting's taken a bit of a turn. I wasn't expecting it to quite go that way off into the valley, but hey ho. I don't think I'm going to complain. I'm quite pleased with how it's turning out. But it goes to show, you know, no matter what you think, no matter what you put on your canvas, this is it's a fluid technique. It's a technique that allows you to evolve your painting. So this is all, you know, I didn't know that this is how sort of this painting was gonna turn out. I didn't think I was gonna put a river in here or anything like that. So you guys are watching this evolve in the same way I am. But it just goes to show exactly, you know, why this technique is so effective, why all of these techniques are so effective, in that the painting evolves with you. It becomes much more than what you probably originally intended it to be. I'm going to come in and just darken some of this along the edge of the riverbank here. Well, because I didn't realise it was going to be a riverbank, I didn't necessarily need to know that I was going to darken it. So I'll just add some dark in there just to lay the land, to set the land down into there a bit. This is all good. What we're going to... I don't really know where we're going to go now. We've got a river in the middle of the painting, but we'll crack on and see what happens. We're going to come into some blue, some brown, a little bit of my yellow still. I want to bring in some darkness here, some land. I want to have something down here for all these trees and things to sit on. The issue we've got now is perspective. This is obviously, we're fairly high looking distance, looking far away into this valley with the river in. So my choice is, do I cut the river off here and create a whole new plane, or do I just bring a plane with a big tree or something across here? I think what I might do is I might continue having this all fairly distant here. So this all becomes part of the river. And maybe we're never going to know where this river goes. Maybe we're stood up here and this is a plateau and you're looking down over onto this river basin. I like the sound of that, so I think that's what we're going to try and aim for. We'll just put some dark colour in here. Now we need to think our light is coming from this direction. So if we lighten anything here, we need to think where our light is going to come and where our shadows are going to be. Shadow is going to come across here. These trees are all going to cast a shadow. But maybe this edge catches some of that sunlight. We'll go on to another filbert brush so I can get a bit lighter, not so muddy colour, and we'll just bring in some lighter tones down here. Notice we're still not bringing in a really garish yellow or anything like that. We're just bringing in a slightly brighter colour. So we know there's land back here, but it's not. It's still not foreground. It's still fairly far away in our distance. It's not foreground yet. Nowhere near foreground yet. As we've said, this is going to be looking down into this river delta. So this isn't going to be foreground colour yet. We've got a big precipice here, so this is all still far away. So we don't want a lot of colour. We'll bring in some blue and brown, mix a muddy colour, and maybe we'll shadow these across a bit, just so we've got some shadow coming across. Come back into our lighter tones. If we wanted, we could just tap in just a hint of green and white, just to give us a lighter tone there. Maybe just there's a hint of colour just creeps through there, and that gives the suggestion that this tree here is creating shadow. Maybe there's a bit there as well. So we've got now the hint of shadow coming through here. So it's giving us perspective. If we take a very soft brush, I'm going to apply a little bit more cad yellow to my palette, and I've got a really soft round brush here. I'm going to come into that cad yellow I want quite a bit of paint on my brush, but I don't want it to be mega bright. It's just going to be a highlight colour. So I'm going to bring some of those, the dark green I've got on the palette, some blue. It's going to be a fairly light highlight colour. I've got quite a bit of paint on my brush there. And just down the edges of these trees, maybe I'll start to just hint that these are evergreens. Just with this highlight colour. And it's just like a tap and a flick. Giving them a bit of shape and form, just to say, well, actually, you know, the sun is coming from one direction. So what we'll want to try and do is turn these trees into three-dimensional objects. I'm just going to catch the edge of them, pull in some of that dark colour as well, because that's going to happen naturally. But because this brush is soft, reloading regularly, I can actually just apply this highlight over the top of the dark colour and then come back in and blend it away slightly. And you can create beautiful trees. If you wanted to put a bit of blue down the side here, you could have a bit of reflective light and just really bring out the edge of that tree. Just with a tiny little bit of reflective light, just to make it to really zing out there. Same with this one. Tiny little blue on the edge. Just to give it a three-dimensional look. Maybe this one, just the tip catches a bit of colour. He's quite deep in there, so he's not going to get a lot of highlight. This one we can pick out just by highlight. We know there's a tree there, I painted it in, so there must be, but we're just going to pick it out with the edges of highlight. That's going to get, is it going to get dark down here because this tree is shadowing it, or does this tree just catch a bit more of the light? We'll bring it down a little way, not much, just a little. Just a hint that maybe there's a bit of light zings through there. Most of this can stay dark. We don't want a lot of colour down here. It can mostly stay dark. As long as we know that our trees are here, we can put in the hint of trunk we want to. But I think we're happy with those to stay fairly dark. We don't want them sort of leaping out at you from the canvas, or from the hardboard, should I say, because then they'll distract from the foreground, and we don't want that to happen. These are still distant trees. There's enough colour there to just let us know they live there. Bit of reflected light, just to pick up the edges of them. And a bit of a silhouette. So, good. Happy with that. What I might do, just come into that yellow. I might just use that to just put a hint more colour in this bit of land here with my really soft flat brush. Actually intimate that there's grassy bits sort of living down here. Maybe along this edge we can make sure we've got a true hint of grassy bits. Just tap and add a bit of texture, and then blend it slightly. Come back to our darker colours, our blue and our brown and our dark green, and we can start sort of just picking up where maybe this is a rocky section. Bit of blue as a reflected light source back here. Just heading off into the distance there, not going to worry too much about that. Maybe just apply some light down here to give us a bit of texture. Shape some rocks down the bottom here by the water. This is all just giving us interest in the painting, giving people something to look at. You're not putting in a huge amount of detail, but you're just saying, well, you know, there are rocks and things living back here. Don't want to lose all our dark. Remember, every little rock you put back here needs its own shadow. It just creates some interest back there. That's looking good. Looking good. I don't know where we're going here. I think we'll bring in some big bushes along here, I think. I need to think about what's going here. Not quite got there yet. Good, pleased with all this so far. I think I need something, I need to bring this foreground out. So I'm going to grab some more brown. I'm just splatting onto my palette. I'm going to grab some black. Just want some dark colour here. I'm not going to mess around. Want some dark colour. Grab my good old dark filbert brush. I'm just going to put some underpainting back here a bit more. Just so I know there's some dark colour back there in case I need to highlight something. I'm going to come into that brown and black. Probably a bit more black than the brown. So I've pulled the brush through that into a chiselled edge. And I think maybe here. We'll pull a tree through. If you do this too many times, obviously you're gonna pull through colour that's already on the canvas or on the hardboard. So you want to try and do these in as fewer strokes as you possibly can. He's going to have a friend who's going to live there. No, I think we'll stick with 2 for now. 2 should be fine to start with. Now, so we've got a couple of tree trunks there. I'm not going to put any limbs on them yet. What I'm going to do is just leave them to dry slightly. Then I can highlight them and I can start putting some leaves up there. They're not backlit in any way, shape or form, so we could use our filbert brush and just start flicking in. Maybe these are old evergreens, so we'll start flicking in some evergreen leaves up here. And it's like a tick stroke, so you start and you flick and it creates these evergreen sort of branches, but there's not a huge amount of paint going on the canvas here. You know, I'm not laying on a huge thick amount of paint. I'm just creating just enough paint on here to allow it to come off my brush. Now these kind of evergreens, you tend to get all the leaves at the top, so that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to just put all our leaves sort of fairly high up here, and leave a lot of trunk down here that we can add texture to, just to make it look more interesting. If you find you have trouble getting this paint to come off your brush, load more paint on your brush than what you would normally use, and you'll find you can drop these dark leaves in quite easily, even over the top of what's already on the canvas. Then when we come to highlight these, we'll have let it dry a little bit. We'll be able to highlight those. That'll be a couple of evergreen trees sort of living out there. And this might be a good time to define down here the edge of our precipice. So what we'll do is literally cut off that bottom edge. And these, again, I'm just using the filbert brush and tapping in. So this will be the edge of the precipice that we've looked at. I might have some rocks and stuff down here as well. But along here, I think we'll just have some bushes. So I'll start at the bottom and tap upwards, because the higher you get, obviously a bit more light is going to come through the bush. The lower you get, the more in shadow it's going to be. So we can in essence cut off all our background there by bringing in some trees and bushes. Down here, I don't know, I think we might have some rocks and stuff down here. We'll see what happens along there in a minute. Maybe a path will come through here, so it looks like you can come out and look over the landscape here. Let's get something in on this side. We need something in here. First things first, what I'm going to do, grab my dark colours. I just want to put in another layer of land in here. Otherwise my river's going to escape on me and I'm not going to know where it's going. So we've got another layer of land just there. Bring that down a bit into the river. That's good. Doesn't really matter what happens out here, we can blend that down into into there. Just putting some dark colour on. We can add layer and texture and everything like that in a moment. Here I think we went into some trees, so we can just tap those in again. Maybe we'll bring some forwards just to give this layer a bit of depth. What you could do, using the very tip, you can actually come in here and start actually making it look like trees and bushes and stuff living on there. It just gives it a bit more depth and distance, and that's never a bad thing. The more depth and distance you get in your paintings, the more people will think, wow, that's really good, I'm going to put one there as well. So just tap in. So even these areas that I've already painted, if you're careful, you can actually come back in and add texture and depth and distance to it to make it actually come alive, to make it look like, you know, there's all manner of things happening back here. We'll highlight those, we'll bring them into a forest. Grab some of my yellow and you can actually come in here and drop some colour in and actually start to make it look like there are trees and things living way back here. Just maybe a bit closer than this bit, which is, we drop some hint of colour just in there. Not a lot, just enough to make us think there's stuff living there. Maybe this bit is just a tiny bit closer. The important thing doing this is that you keep shadow in here. This has to be, you have to think about where your light source is coming from still. So you still need shadow to give it depth and make it feel like it's still quite far away. That's good, that worked well. Just missed out the bottom bit. Tap some down into our water. Come back to our brush that's got our watercolours on it, which is just the blues and the whites and stuff. We can just bring our river across there. Okay, good. Now I think we're going to have maybe not a massive tree living up here, but a slightly further or slightly closer tree. Sort of semi-distance to these ones, so halfway size. So what I'm going to do, come through dark colour. I've got my soft brush. Come through plenty of dark colour. I'm going to bring one side through a lighter colour, and that's going to be the highlight side. And I'll bring that down. I think we're only going to have one that side. Now if you wanted to use this soft brush to apply your leaves to this one, you can. And again, it's the same kind of thing. You're just creating this flick stroke. Almost like you're painting ticks, if you would. Think about the shape of evergreen branches. They kind of sort of hang down and droop, don't they? Obviously you want to keep these darker towards the centre of the tree because that's where the shadow is going to be. The trunk is going to create shadow in your leaves at that point. Going towards the outside of the tree, you can afford to get lighter and lighter because there's light going to come through the trees. You know, the leaves are going to allow light to come through. Good. What we're going to do, grab some white on our soft brush, and these we can just sort of roughly highlight down the sides. If you don't press too hard, the paint will break and will give you texture to your trunks without you really doing a significant amount of work. These soft brushes are really good for this technique. They just allow you to basically flow over everything else that's on the canvas without too much aggravation. You can flick out limbs and bits and pieces down here with them. If you apply a highlight and it's too bright, just rub over it again. Not going to do any harm. So you just rub over it. Got a hair on my brush there. Just rub over it and it will disappear on you. So you know, don't worry too much if you put too much highlight on. Just go over it and the highlight will disappear on you. And you know, it'll soon disappear. With that done, we're going to get some light blue. Not a hugely bright blue colour, but we're just going to have a hint of blue, and we'll just drop a reflected light source in blue down the side of the tree there. Just gives it a bit of shape and form. Like so. Notice I've not done a huge amount of highlighting. I'm letting paint rest, let it sit on the canvas for a while, so that I'm not working into constantly wet colour. Now looking down here, I'm thinking my river may come across here a bit. So I want to just bring it across. Get some of my dark colour and I'm going to reflect that down into the water and then just smudge it in. I'm not sure quite what's going to happen in here yet. I just wanted to bring that water across a bit, so I haven't got to go and back paint it if I don't bring sort of my bushes any further across. I think that bush can live there and push the water back a bit, like so. Leave those trees, we'll highlight them in a minute. Still need something to go on over here, don't we? Got my mucky old filbert brush. Notice I've not actually washed any brushes yet. unusual for me, but I've not done any washing of brushes. I think up here maybe we'll bring in a big old evergreen that lives here. Coming down here, you can just go into darkness, doesn't matter. I'm only interested in the top edge. Maybe he's got a friend that lives just next to him. If you're not happy with the shape of your evergreen, just grow it a bit. You know, you can't do anything majorly wrong here. You can plant trees, you can grow trees, you can cut trees down. You know, it's entirely up to you. Tell you what we're going to do. We're going to push this layer here. I want to push it right back, so I'm going to have another evergreen there. And by putting another evergreen here, this whole section gets pushed back. And what I could do, looking at it, is I could bring that evergreen right the way down. So this can all become darkness. Here can become bush. And then I've sealed in my river. So I've created a whole plane of view there. The river is now over the edge. I've got a couple of trees here that have created a whole boundary, a whole layer. We're almost silhouetting what's happened in the background, and we're now jumping to the foreground. I've still got a really messy palette. You know, my palette is a state. I'll show you it in a moment. Let me just bang this other evergreen in here, and I'll show you how messy my palette is. In fact, down here, it doesn't matter. This is all going to be dark. It's all going to be split up with highlights. We're not going to worry about it. Just tap in to add some texture. But look at how messy my palette is. It's disgusting. But all of the colours have flown through. They're everywhere in the picture. There's no colour that I've put on here that I haven't really used somewhere else in the picture. So there's always a link through. I'm going to bring up maybe an evergreen in front of him. So there's always a link through. Just to darken that a bit, and then I'll refill in the tree trunk there. But my colour scheme, the colours that started back here, are now flowing through the entire picture. And everything is, because of that, everything blends together. Everything becomes one. It just helps when people view your picture. There's no jarring sort of colour tones in there that aren't anywhere else in the picture. They all live, all the colours exist somewhere in the picture already. So they're not looking at your picture thinking, well, you know, where did that colour come from? So again, we've just dropped in some dark down the edges here. And the only thing I'm interested in is this top edge. Not really worried at all what happens down in this edge. We just wanted some darkness in here, which, you know, I'll highlight it or do whatever. We'll figure that out in a moment when we get there. Let's go back to these leaves on these evergreens. So I'm going to come back to my small round brush, come into my cad yellow, I'm going to start off the edge of the darkness here and just with little flicks just bring in that colour. And we'll start off the edge again and with little flicks bring in the colour more towards the centre. Pick up too much colour, then just reload your brush a bit. You can get as soft as you want, but the beauty of this little soft brush is it allows you to lay colour over the top of other colour, whereas if you used a hard brush, the hard brush would cut through the paint that's already on the canvas and you wouldn't be able to do this. So you need a soft brush to do this, and it just allows you to add highlights over the top of these other dark colours we've already got in here. Because it's soft, you can do it over the top of the colours that already exist on the palette, or on the canvas should I say. This is still only a mid-tone highlight. We might come back and add some more in here in a minute just to really make it look like these are standing out there and catching the sun. But notice primarily my highlights are still picking up from here. My highlight source is still here, so I'm darker on this side than I am on this side. Conversely, when I go to highlight this one, most of my highlights are going to be on this side of the tree. And again, you're just creating these flicks of colour that make it look like you've painted leaves on the tree, or in this case, pine needles, I suppose. But it's just enough to hint. Now on this side, we're just going to do the edges because we want to make it look like it's slightly backlit. So we're just going to do like the top edges of some leaves. Just so it looks like the sun's coming through in a couple of places. Like so. Now if you wanted to, you could bring some white into that colour. So you've now got a really bright highlight colour, and you can really sort of bring that right out onto the edges here. It's just creating layers of highlight and colour. Always thinking about your light source. So where the light might catch these limbs. Where the sunlight might zing through and really make them sparkle. Go over to our other one this side, and we can just add some on there. Now notice this one isn't as detailed as the other one because it's further away, so I didn't want as much detail on it. There's enough to hint that it's still an evergreen tree, but I'm not over detailing it. we'll come back to that in a moment, and we'll add some more branches in there, just to give that a bit more depth and distance. Got some evergreens here. Let's have a look at highlighting those. So again, cad yellow, mixing it with a load of my other greens that I've got here. This time I'm going to use my filbert. I'm just going to come down the edge and just flick some of that colour in. So again, you know, nobody is telling you you've got to use one kind of brush. You've got to do it one way. You've got to do it another. If you don't do it this way, it's wrong. You haven't got to think like that. It's whatever brush works for you, whatever technique works for you. You know, whatever's going to allow you. So we've highlighted with the filbert brush. Tell you what, let's go back to our round brush again. Darken that colour, and you can do the same with the round brush. You know, you can highlight with the round brush. You can flick these out and make them look however you want them. So they can become highlighted. So it's whatever is going to work for you is the correct way of doing it. Here again is the filbert. So I can pick out the edge of this one with the filbert and then tap in the middle a bit more and dull it. Maybe this one just picks up right on the edge there. If you get too much highlight, scrub it off on your palette and just tap, and it'll disappear on you. You'll just get the evergreen tree back. So it's just a question of figuring out what you want to do, what brushes you want to use. Okay, we said we were going to bring this one back into play, so I've got dark and light on my soft brush. I'll just bring that tree right the way in front of everything. Grab some blue, some light blue, and just drop a blue highlight down the edge. Reflected light just in there, like so. Grab some dark colour again. So our blues, browns, black. I want something in here. I think I might have a path in here. While I've got the river coming through here, I think what we might have is some path coming down here. So I'm going to have mostly brown down here, I think. I'm just going to lay in an under colour of brown. Right the way down to the bottom of the canvas here. So that's going to be my path. I'm just going to just go right way back there. Obviously it needs to go thicker here. Good. I'm going to come into my yellows and greens. And I think here we might have some grass coming up here, or just underpaint a yellowy green colour in here. This is where it might turn a bit more traditional wet on wet than what we've been doing so far. I might get the 1-inch brush out and just tap in grassy areas along here that I can work with. I might use the fan brush. We shall see. Here I have the same. This is just an undercolour. That's all it is, an undercolour. Just giving me a rough idea of what's going to happen along here. Good. Yeah, if the sun's coming through here, obviously we're going to have a bit of highlights on our trees here, so let's just grab our filbert and we'll just highlight some of these bushes in. So lighter at the top, and obviously then just blending down. And we can use our greys. We've got loads of colours here that we can use to drop these bushies in. If one goes a bit OTT on you, then just tap it and it will get darker again. Or you can come into dark and you can just drop that shadow back in. Just tone it down. Obviously back here we're getting a bit further into the darkness, so we'll not have half as much highlight there. Okay, good. So what we can do, if I grab a 1-inch brush from my trusty stack of brushes, I want to bring a bit more colour into this at the front here, because obviously we're getting really quite close to our viewpoint now, so the colours here need to get a bit more vibrant. We need to start picking up, you know, a lot more colour, a lot more highlight. So this is a bit more of the pure yellow, but I'm going to drop in some phthalo blue into it. Just cad yellow, phthalo blue, and a bit of white just to dull it from the blue edge a tiny bit. So it's still quite blue, and just here I can start to form some beautiful grass that's living down here. And back up here needs to stay dark, 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 dark. But here, closer to where the sun might come through, I can start forming some really nice soft grassy areas along the edge of this path. Doesn't matter what happens up there so much, we're not worried about it. And the more you tap, they'll disappear on you. Come to this other side, this is pretty much directly beneath our sun now, so this side I think will really make it look like we've got some nice grass along the edge here. I'm still thinking we're still not right on top of this, so this is still quite distant. This darker back here. This is all going to be shadow. This is all, these bushes are casting shadow. We still need some colour in there, but they're casting shadow. The sun isn't hitting back there. So we've done that. I've got a flat brush, soft flat brush. I'm going to come into my greys, some of my brown, which I've still got up here mixed on the palette. Maybe just a bit of blue in there as well. I'm going to work on sort of back here, maybe just hinting that this is a path. Just with soft strokes, and start bringing a path in there. You can hint at some rocks and such like. Maybe there's some. This is all turning into rocks and bits of rubble. Again, not a lot of detail, and all I'm doing is dropping in sort of where I think there's going to be rocks and rubble along this piece of road, and it's just flicking, just keeping the lighter side of the rock obviously higher, and once you flick you get a darker section. The eye fills in the rest. You've created that rock, you've created a highlight there, and the eye fills out everything else that belongs in here. It's just a question of remembering where your light source is coming from. Back here, all of these rocks are small. You know, they blend almost into one back here. That's where our path is. And it's almost blending into one. As it comes forwards, then we start picking up detail. We start picking up actual stones here on the path. They become obvious to us. So they turn into actual stones and boulders and all manner of things that can live here amongst the grass. Maybe here there's a larger stone just lives there, so take some light and then apply some dark, blend it back a bit, and then you've got a larger stone lives there. Do it the other way. We'll take some dark, we'll bring that right up here. Because this is a soft brush, so I can apply colour over the top of what I've already got here. I'm still using this old pile of colour I've got on my palette. Not worrying about it. Just creating all these lovely shapes of the rock. You can be quite loose with it. It's I'll tell you what, down here we'll keep it going. We'll grab the old filbert brush. It's a bit slow going with that soft brush, and we'll black in all down here, black and brown. That's just black and brown in there, like so. We'll keep going with this soft brush now, and again this soft square brush allows you to really work in, you can put angles in here and you can create angular rocks. Pick up your dark colours and just drop darkness in here where the shadow is going to be. Come back to your light colours, and again you can just hint at a smaller rock there. This isn't. I'm not doing anything anybody couldn't do here. It's just dark and light, playing dark against light, using the shape of the brush to put light and dark here and create flat edges and create non-flat edges, which just give shape and form to things. And that's all you're doing. Because my palette is messy, all of these colours are not pure. They're creating their own range of colours just from what I've got on the palette. I'm not mixing colours, I'm just being really lazy and not cleaning my brush, and that's allowing me to texture the land that I'm putting down here in such a way with colour and shape and form Now coming along here, obviously we're getting a bit into the darkness here, so we're going to bring some blue into our colours. It's getting dark down here, so we'll start putting some dark colours in here, some dark rocks. Maybe down here where there's some darkness. That looks really nice. That works quite well down there. This is all drying quite nicely up here. We need something here. Not quite sure what we'll put there yet. Could have a big tree coming down here to really bring this into the foreground, but I quite like that left as it is. That's working quite well for me at the minute. If you grab a fan brush, what you can do is come in and grab your green, and in places here you can flick upwards and it creates tufts of grass that live here amongst the rocks. And it's not a, it is literally a flick upwards with this colour. You touch and you flick upwards. And some you get bright, some you get darker. But it just creates interest, and you get weeds and reeds and bits of grass and stuff living out here. You want to try and keep those brush strokes in there, because they'll make it look like things are living out here in the path. Give people interesting things to look at. As they get further away, obviously you want to keep them smaller, but bring them closer and you can flick them in quite happily. Okay, let's get our liner brush. This is probably the only time we're going to grab some thinners on our liner brush. Quite a lot of thinners. Come into our dark colours. So our blacks and our browns. And we can start putting in some limbs on our trees. Okay, apologies if it looks like there's an edit in there. There isn't an edit, I just my memory card ran out on my camera. So I've just had to go and swap out. So I've got a new memory card in the camera, and all I was doing is I've just thinned down some of my dark paint, and I was just putting some dead limbs and bits and bobs on these trees. Same with this one. You're not going to see all the branches because, you know, the leaves are in the way. Some are going to be too small to see. But you can, you know, you can hint that there are branches here among the tree, in the tree. Then as you come down the tree, you know, maybe there are some small branches just coming off. And what's sometimes nice, come into some white, or in this case some mucky white. I haven't got pure white on here anymore, and you can do some white branches coming off these. That just gives them a bit more character. You know, these old trees, they all have dead branches coming off them. And it also creates another plane that people can look at in your painting. You know, if these trees have branches coming off them, then people have got things to look at, and you can use them to knock back other sections of the painting. So this white branch here, for instance, is coming distinctly in front of that evergreen tree. So this tree must be in front of those. So it forces, it gives you a tool by which you can control depth and distance in your painting. we'll just use a bit more of that colour down the side of those to make sure they're highlighted in. Down here you can even bring, you know, some of their limbs out. Flick up some bits and bobs. We'll come back and put some extra twigs in there in a minute. We need to figure out what's going on in this corner. I quite like the mirror of the path going back there. That looks quite nice. What I want to do is just darken up that little section there. Just maybe drop a hint of colour in there. Yes, that just looks like some bushes living way off in the distance there. So, got a mucky old palette here, but you know, it helps. It keeps everything all the same tonal value. You're not shocking the viewer with anything you're putting onto the palette with colour and shape and form. I'm thinking most of our colour is coming through here, so the sun is coming through here. So I want to keep, in a way, I want to keep this side a lot darker. So I'm thinking we can actually afford to keep really dark in this corner, just to make it look like there's much more light coming through in the area where there is much more light coming through. So what we'll do, we'll throw a lot of darkness in this corner. This is our brown path that we worked on, so we'll just scrub that across. The danger here is to overwork. You know, you'll think, oh, I've got to have something to fill in this corner, and you know, there are no rules. Nobody's going to say, oh, you've got to fill in that corner, otherwise the painting won't look right. In a way, it's sometimes better to have a really dark section of your painting, because it makes everything else look brighter. So if you've got a really dark section, all it's going to do is make anything you've highlighted look all the brighter. So don't be afraid of this dark area. Don't think you've got to fill every section of your canvas with detail and with colour, because there isn't a need to. Yes, we're going to have something in here, but it might just be a silhouette. It might be, I don't know, just a big dark old tree coming up in here. It might be nothing. I don't know what I'm going to put in here yet, but it's not something I'm going to stress and I'm going to worry about. I like the fact that there's some bushes living down here, so we're going to keep those in place just with our filbert brush. That's working really well for me. I like the way this dark is highlighting against the sun coming through there. So what I might do is just darken the edge of that rock. Now I'm going to darken this rock here as well, just because I want a bit more contrast in there. I like that darkness. That darkness lends depth and shadow to our painting. So, you know, we need the darkness in there to tell us, well, the light is coming from here. So down here is going to be, it's going to be dark. You know, I don't want bright highlights everywhere. I want some darkness in here. Just to let people see depth and distance, and the fact there is shadow and light all in my painting. You can come back in and you can add darkness to some of these rocks. And it's just having a delicate touch, it's all it is. Because we jump around the canvas a bit, I've not focused on one side of the canvas completely before moving to another side. It allows some of this paint to dry, and it then means you can come back in and you can darken areas and you can add extra shadow where maybe there wasn't some before. And it just gives you more of a three-dimensional look of things. It allows you to really focus and think about where dark and shadow is. So down this edge of the tree, look, we've lost some of our shadow there, so I'll just drop some of that in. And here, I don't know, maybe we've got another layer of bushes. I think some of them may pick up some light, some of them may not. But again, because I've not gone jet black here, I can use tonal values to create more depth and more distance. What we haven't got, we've got a background, we've got middle ground. These trees are working as a middle ground. We've started to come into a foreground here. What we need is something to really bring us into the foreground. So you know what, I think down here we're going to have a big old tree. It doesn't matter that we've lost some of our evergreens back there. You know they were there eventually. We're going to have a big old tree. And maybe, I don't know, maybe... Does he have a friend? No, he's not going to have a friend. He's just going to sit there. I mean, he's going to go into sort of pretty much darkness, I think. What I might do is here use a tonal value of dark and light. So because I didn't put pure black back here, I can tap in bushes. Okay, apologies again. My camera's been playing silly buggers. Until I actually look at what I've recorded, I don't know how much you've seen. But anyway, we've dropped this big tree in. So he's in there. And all I was doing was dropping in some tones here in the background. Just so there's some depth and distance. You can hint at these evergreens can come down further. Because I didn't put black back here, pure black, I can use tonal values to still make it look like things are happening back here, even though in essence I'm not doing anything, it's just brush strokes. You're not highlighting or anything, you're just working in tones of darkness. Down here we were happy with these bushes, so we're just going to work in a bit more there, and you know, maybe we'll come back and highlight them just with a bit of highlight. May keep most of them dark. Now our tree here, we're going to use our soft flat brush that we've got. We're going to come into our brown and white, and you can touch and drag down, and if you gently do it, reload the brush regularly, gently do it, you can actually, almost like using the palette knife, you can start to add texture and colour to the edge of the tree. If you don't press too hard, you get the shape of the brush in here. And it's quite a way away from the light, so we just want to you need quite a bit of colour on your brush to do this. It works because, not because the brush is the brush is soft, but it also works because there's a lot of colour on the brush. I'm just loading up some more titanium white onto my palette. Load up plenty of that colour. Mix, still mixing it with some of the old rubbish colour. I've got a lot of colour on my brush here, so I can come down and that colour can flow off of the end of the brush, and as you rotate it'll pick up clean bits, and you can dab and you can move to create all manner of things going along on the side of this tree. Down here it's going to get into the darkness, obviously. So think about how trees look. Keep adding fresh colour. Obviously most of your colour wants to be on this edge. This is where the sun's hitting, so if you start to pick up too much colour, just scrape it off on your palette, come back and apply again, and you can start to really create a beautiful tree here. It's all about not pressing too hard. The palette will pick up what it wants, leave you the rest. We're going to get some blue here. And we're going to do the same down this side, and we're just going to have a reflected blue highlight down this side of the tree. But I'm not pressing hard. The paint, the paint that's on the palette is picking up as much as it wants to pick up and leaving me what it wants to leave me on the brush. But it's just enough to just put a bit of blue reflected colour down the side here. Just to show a bit of roundness. You can scrub this in. Keep this edge really, really bright. If the centre gets too light on you, come back with some dark colour, and you can just brush back in and darken it again. There's nothing stopping you coming in here, and you can create knots in the tree and all manner of things that happen on trees. And it's just working with dark and light again, the same as we were on anything else. Some of these old trees have sort of big old cutouts in them, so you can create cutout. Just put some dark in there. Down the bottom here, he may be getting all gnarly, and maybe that's a knot in the tree there. And because this is a soft brush, I can go back in and just apply dark colour over the top of the light colour I've already got, until we get to the stage that you want it to be. Now, coming from this knot here, I've created sort of a thing so we can have a branch coming off there. That'll come off just like so. Maybe there's a bit of a crook in him there, and an old limb comes down here somewhere. We don't know. Doesn't matter. That can be an old broken limb. It's coming off there. And the paint is a lot thicker here. So he'll actually, you know, that will actually feel like bark when that's all dry. The other side of the tree here, we're going to grab a bit more blue, and we're just going to drop some blue reflected highlight down the side there. In tonal value, it's darker than the white, but because it's blue, it stands out, and it just gives an extra three-dimension look to the tree. It drops the shadows out. It just means that it gives you something else to look at. Just in there, we get our round brush. I've not cleaned this round brush yet. It's still covered in the green and yellow I used to highlight everything else. But you know, we can use that to maybe extend this limb a bit. Maybe give him a couple of wafty ones coming off here. Oh, he's an old sad tree, this one. Had a hard old life, this one. If we come the other side and grab some of that blue and white, still quite a lot of paint on the brush. It needs to be to do this, so you need a lot of paint on the brush to do it. And we'll just hint at a couple of old branches coming off here. And this isn't, I've not thinned the paint anywhere. All I'm doing is making sure I've got plenty of paint on the brush so that when I touch, it's coming off the brush of its own accord. And you can go, you know, you can put as many of these or as few of these on as you want. It's entirely up to you. I'm not going to tell you how many branches your tree is going to have. You can make that as old and decrepit as you want to make it. Let's he's quite happy there, I quite like him there, but what I want to do, I'm going to come into my greens, and I think I'm just going to hint at some dark green down here. Not a lot, just enough, just to bring a bit up the base of the tree there. Keeping it fairly dark. Because obviously we're heading off into the shadow of the tree here. It's just going to give a bit of colour just to that side. Maybe we could come in and just hint at some bushes back here. Just drop a bit of colour in here. Don't want much colour back here at all. I want really more dark than colour. And what you could actually do is come in with your dark colour and really shadow. Now I've got this green here, I can now use my darker colours to shadow the tree back. So this all becomes shadow. I've given enough hint there at something, so now I can shadow and keep that really, really dark back there. We'll come back to our liner brush. Get some thinners. So again, just one of the only times we're thinning down colour in this style of painting. And we can just flick in some grassy bits here and there. Not too many, just something to keep the eye wandering. The more little interesting things you can put in your painting, obviously the more people will look at it, and every time they view your painting they'll see something new. Give them something to look at. Maybe back in here there's some little grassy things just living at the foot of that tree. Maybe there's even some flowers out here in the grass. We don't know. If we get a dark colour, again, just going to create a really wet dark colour with the liner brush, and we can flick up a few bits and bobs in here. Just that are going to be in silhouette against the sun there. Our old tree can have a just sharpen up some of those tips, some of his gnarly bits. Maybe down there there's just a couple of blades of grass live at his feet that are just catching that sunlight as it comes through there. And because it's all dark down here, they're going to show up so much. That's going to just look like all manner of weeds and grasses all living down there. All about depth and distance. I think we'll just about call that one done. Now what I have done, let me find my brush that I've done it on. On the end of my round brush there, I just trimmed the end off with a scalpel, and what it means is you can scratch your name through the paint just to sign it. So I hope you've enjoyed that painting. I hope it's given you some ideas and a few clues as to how I've changed my technique and how I've brought some of my Bob Ross wet on wet technique into some other people's wet on wet techniques. Yeah, so I hope that helps. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.